once we end the session. While the norm we follow is social distancing, such digital engagements are bringing everybody close in terms of knowledge sharing and getting connected virtually. So today's session is divided into two parts. In our first part, we have a guest speaker who will throw light on logistics role in agile supply chain. Post that, we will have an elaborated discussion with our panel members who are invited. To start with, I'd like to invite Dr. Rakesh Sinha, who is our honored guest for today. He has been associated for almost 4 decades with Godrej, with leading roles in manufacturing projects, supply chain, strategy, IT, and marketing. His experience spans across several countries, including India, US, Indonesia, Africa, Argentina, Chile. He was the global head of supply chain, manufacturing, and IT before his superannuation. He holds the distinction of being the first doctorate in supply chain management in India. He is the CEO and founder of specialized consulting firm called Reflexive Supply Chain Solution, focused on improving supply chain agility in supply chains. Dr. Sinha, it's an honor to have you here, and over to you.
Thanks, Aditya. So, over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll try to cover the importance of agility in logistics and how logistics can be an essential enabler for agile supply chains. Now, this recent pandemic, COVID-19, has thrown unprecedented challenge to all of us. None of us could expect it, obviously. But one thing that has come out clearly in this pandemic so far, in the last 2.5 months or so, is that companies which have been on the journey of agility have fared much better, and I'll elaborate on that as I go along. Companies which have been agile have been much better placed in the current scenario. And the companies which have not been so agile are left a little bit behind. The good thing is many companies which have not been on agility journey have either consciously or intuitively adopted several agile practices. And it's a good thing that the pandemic has forced all of us to be much more agile. And I sincerely hope that once the pandemic gets over, these companies would continue on their agility journey and continue to reap benefits of that. COVID has really disrupted on many fronts, not only chemicals industry, but I'm talking in general of all the industries, including consumer goods industry. The first disruption is obviously on the supply side, when initially logistics was disrupted, when the lockdown started and trucks were not moving. Trucks were stranded at several places. The drivers had left their vehicles and gone to their homes. So a lot of manufacturing facilities were closed down, workers were not available. So there has been some disruption, a lot of disruption on the supply side, which is now slowly limping back to normal. I am told that many industries have started functioning at 50% to 70% capacity. And over the next couple of weeks, they would be close to 80-85% of the pre-COVID levels in terms of supply of items. The second major disruption, and that has really caused a lot of worry to the supply chain people, is on the demand side. We have seen certain consumer goods, especially like hand sanitizers, hand wash, and masks, etc. The demand has gone through the roof, maybe 50 times higher, 100 times higher in certain cases. So demand disruption has been a much bigger thing than the supply disruption. So the supply disruption would come back to normal sooner, but the demand disruption has been more or less, would leave a permanent imprint. The third disruption has been in terms of consumer behavior. And this is felt more by the consumer goods companies, either FMCG or consumer durables, where consumer behavior has changed. We're not getting into the details of the change in consumer behavior, but even for B2B industries, the customer behavior has changed in terms of the quantities which they earlier used to order and the quantities which they now order. So the frequency of ordering, the batching of orders, etc., has undergone a sea change. and that has affected all the industries. In all this turbulence, one thing is very important, that's how the supply chains function. And the importance of supply chains has been really high during the pandemic, and everyone is talking about the supply chain, right from the topmost officials in the government. Let's understand what is agility in supply chain and how logistics can help companies be more agile, can make their supply chains much more agile. To understand it, let me focus on three specific aspects of agility. And if we take care of these three things, then our company supply chain would be more agile. I'm not talking of the basic things like demand sensing. How do we improve the sensing of demand, the velocity of consumption, the acceleration of consumption, and how do we have a good fulfillment process? That's a separate topic. But I'm talking of for any function to improve in supply chain, be it logistics, be it manufacturing, be it procurement, or be it planning. There are three important tenets of agility which are common across all these functions. And today we'll discuss what does it mean for logistics to be much more agile. The first one is the flexibility. Now, what do we mean by flexibility in logistics? Uh, you would find that the customers who employ logistics services from 3PL, 4PL, or even independent truck owners, they would want different numbers of vehicles. So gone are the days when the 3PLs could insist that give me a day or two in advance how many vehicles of what capacity you would need on a particular route. Now is the time when the logistics service providers have to be agile enough and accept the, the changing vehicle size, the changing vehicle requirements, the changing lanes on a dynamic basis. So the companies which have this inherent flexibility to deploy the number of vehicles, the types of vehicles on a particular route would be the winner. So flexibility in terms of vehicle size, number of, also from time to time, the same customer for the same product may need temperature control vehicles with ISO tankers, or some of the food companies, not chemical, some of the food companies require the cold chain logistics. But in chemicals, many companies require, like Godrej also required ISO tankers to be placed during winter for the same product. And during summer, there's no need for heated vehicles. So how flexible are we to deploy whatever is the customer requirement? That's important. And same thing goes with the warehousing or the storage. How flexible do we have the warehousing, right from the source of supply to the final destination of the customer? If it has to be stored in between, then how flexible are we in terms of storage quantity, the storage timing, etc. So flexibility in the entire logistics area is extremely important for companies to run an agile supply chain. The second important part is the response time, the fast response. Agility means fast response, and many people consider only fast response as the only part of agility, which is not true. It's an important part, but not the only part of agility. So in terms of fast response, let me elaborate. There are several. If you see the complete time taken from the time a customer wants to send a vehicle from a source to a particular destination, the first part is the indenting of vehicles and the time that elapses between indent to the placement of vehicles. We have seen that during normal times, sometimes this could be as high as 24 hours, although there have been logistics service providers which have placed vehicles or which have an SLA to place vehicles within 6 to 8 hours, but the normal practice is either 12 hours to 24 hours. So they would insist on an indent 24 hours in advance. The second part of this is the loading and the unloading time. Again, we see a lot of time wastage, and the vehicle has to stand at the customer premises for loading, and at the destination at the customer premises again. So the loading time, unloading time, and obviously the transit time. If the vehicles cover typically 300 kilometers in a day, if there are certain logistics providers which can provide vehicles covering 600 to 700 kilometers a day, then those would be the preferred vendors. So in terms of timing, right from indent to placement, the loading, unloading, the transit, and very important is the track and trace facility for the vehicles. Track and trace means several things. One is just the location tracing, which many logistics service providers now offer. Location tracing is relatively easier, but tracing some of the other parameters which could be important for the product, like in some cases, the temperature sensing throughout the transit is important. There could be times when certain products require humidity control. So are we measuring humidity? Are we controlling it? Are we providing enough exception reports in case it's out of that? That's the second part. So flexibility is the first part, fast response is the second one. And the third one, which is extremely important, is the what is known as the flow of value in supply chain. Now, when we produce something or when a company produces something, it has some inherent value for the customer. Now, this definition of value differs from people to people, but basically the product satisfies certain needs of the customers and it provides certain value. And we know that the value of this product deteriorates over time for most of the products, except maybe things like wines, which get better when they are old. But all other products, the value deteriorates over time. So if we take, for example, 10 days to reach from source to destination, the value has possibly diminished much compared to if logistics could deliver the product in 2 days, the value would have remained more or less intact. Now this, the quality of the product is one of the value elements, and the entire control of this quality through temperature sensors, through humidity sensors, through any other parameters which could be important for the customer and for that particular product, that's important. So if the value that we receive at the source is X, are we delivering the same X value at the destination, or is the value going down to X minus Y? And what is this Y component, and how do we minimize the loss of value during logistics? It's not really possible for Y to be zero. That means there is no loss of value. There would be certain loss of value because time itself reduces the value of the products. But apart from that, are we minimizing the loss of value? So agility doesn't mean that you run the vehicles at double the speed and it deteriorates the quality of the product. No, the value has to be maintained of the product. So anything that we do to make the operations more agile is not at the cost of quality. That's the fundamental tenet of agile supply chains, that the value of the product has to be preserved. In case of solids, it's much more visible, because if the boxes are dented or the product is dented on the way, it's visible that the value has gone down. Or if the product has got damaged or the wrapper has got torn on the way, then obviously the value has gone down. In liquids, it's not so visible, but the receiving location would test and see if the value is still intact or it has gone down. So if we focus on these three things, the flexibility, the fast response, and the flow of value, and how do we improve our operations on all the three fronts simultaneously, then we are moving towards an efficient logistics network for agile supply chains. Now, technology of late has played a major role in ensuring that the value is fully delivered. And the technology, there are technology platforms which provide full range service, right from indenting to placement of vehicles to the track and trace during transit, loading, unloading, everything. So these technology platforms are becoming important. In some cases, the company's logistics and the company's supply chain uses multiple players to put together this technology platform. On the other hand, there are single technology platforms which cover the entire journey from source to destination and give what is the most important part for the supply chain people. That's the peace of mind. That if I have sent an item from X, it will reach with full value to destination Y in the shortest possible time that I want without any damage to the product and preserving the full quality of the product. So delivering this peace of mind is very important. And if you want to run an agile supply chain, I would again reiterate flexibility, fast response, and flow of value are the three things. Now, companies during the pandemic have intuitively focused, for example, on faster transit, on faster turnaround, on faster placement of vehicles. Now, the question is, does it remain as the standard practice post the pandemic in the new normal? Or do we go back to the old ways of working and start insisting that you place indent at least 24 hours in advance? If we go back to the old ways of working, then we have given up all the gains of on the agility front that we got during the pandemic. On the other hand, if we change our practices and retain all the good parts of working during the pandemic, which is again, flexibility is very high currently during the pandemic. The fast response is really at the peak. So how do we ensure that these become part of our ways of working in the new normal and we do not go back to the old ones is important. Companies which will do that have moved ahead on their agility journey and they would close the distance between them and the agile companies. And the companies which go back to the earlier ways of working would again fall behind. And once customers have tasted agility, we can rest assured that they would insist on agility even in the new normal. So it's rather too much to expect that the customers would expect the old ways of working once we come to the new normal. Everyone knows the benefits of logistics and what logistics has delivered during the pandemic, and they would insist on this as the new normal. So these are some of the things that I thought we should consider to make logistics as an integral part of the agile supply chain, not only an integral part, but an essential enabler to the agile supply chains. And of course, agile manufacturing, agile procurement, agile planning are the other three pillars of agile supply chain. But unless the logistics is agile, the whole system is remains incomplete. So these are some of my thoughts on logistics in agile supply chains. And I would look forward to the deliberation by the panel on how do we improve the agility, especially in the chemicals industry. Thank you.
Thank you, and excellent, Dr. Sinha, to listen to you. I think a very insightful aspect of the supply chain and logistics you've been able to put across. I think three important things which you covered: flexibility, fast response, and flow of value. I think these definitely make so much sense in the current time. And rightly, you also coined one point that it is ultimately delivering the peace of mind, from the supply chain and the logistics angle, which is important. So, really appreciate and thank you very much, Dr. Sinha. Moving over, we will now go for our panel discussion today. We have some very senior leaders today who will share, their inputs on the topic. Starting with the moderator for today's session, we have Mehul Shah. He is presently the CEO of Logos India, and he has over 20 years of experience in the logistics, real estate, investment management, and international business management. Previously, he was a director and CEO of Parekh Integrated Services, an integrated logistics company with presence in over 70 cities across the country. As CEO, he was responsible for creating and implementing the company's long-term strategy, capital raising, and expanding into newer markets. So, welcome, Mehul. In the panel, we have Sanjay Desai. Sanjay runs his own advisory consulting practice, working with startups and SMEs organizations to set up their vision, strategy, and execution planning of the operation processes. Prior, he has spent his entire career leading diverse and world-class supply chain verticals for MNCs like Verifone, Huntsman, Thermo Fisher, Johnson Diversey, Dell, Apple, etc., to just to name a few. He holds a Bachelor's of Commerce degree from Mumbai University and a PG in Materials Management from Premier Indian Business School. He also holds a CPIM certificate from Apex, USA. He is a certified independent director from Institute of Directors, India. He has also completed formal executive leadership management courses at NCED, Singapore. So, welcome, Sanjay. We have Mr. Shankar Kupuswamy. Mr. Shankar has work experience of over 30 years in the corporate world. He has worked in organizations such as Nestle, Levers, Kellogg's, Castrol, in the fields of sales, marketing, safety, supply chain, and logistics in India and abroad. He is a postgraduate in business management and is currently associated as CEO of Nicer Globe, working to improve the logistics standards on processes and practices akin to the global standards. He is associated with the Indian Chemical Council and a representative member of companies of the Chemical Council. So, welcome, Mr. Shankar. Next, we have Deepak Wazirani. He is presently Executive Director Supply Chain, India and Southeast Asia at Diversey India Hygiene Private Limited. He has worked on leading roles of supply chain function at companies like Danone, Abbott, Kaya Skin Clinic, Marico, Asian Paints, just to name a few. He has done his engineering and masters from Symbiosis Institute. In his current role, his gamut of influence includes SNOP and planning function, procurement, manufacturing, 3P ops, QEHS, logistics, warehousing, and distribution. So welcome, Deepak. Last, we have Viral Shah. Viral is the Executive Director at Vitrans India Limited with a special in charge of the warehousing vertical, which is VLogis. He is from the third generation of the promoter family, a postgraduate in MMS from Mumbai's NM Institute. He holds an MBA in logistics management from San Francisco. He superheaded VLogis division to make it a 1 million square feet pan-India comprehensive warehousing player. And he is also instrumental in the milestone development at the Vitrans group, like the ERP development, and also setting up the super niche specialized chemical warehouse called the ChemScope. So let us move to the next part, that is our panel discussion. And I will hand it over to Mehul to take it over from here. Thanks.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you, Aditya. Good afternoon, everyone. I mean, last 70 days, I'm sure everyone has gone over numerous webinars in the areas wherever possible, where in their own specialized field or even the non-specialized field. You know, I mean, I'll just highlight one of that. A friend of mine called me and he said, do you want to get into a webinar, which is that how to behave with your wife when you are locked down? I said, come on, man, I'm living for 20 years. But he says they teach you how to live with your wife 24/7 when there is nowhere to escape. This is the time. So I mean, all such webinars we attended. So let's kick off straight into the purpose why we all have gathered here. I mean, all of us are going through an event which I think the human population, living population, has never experienced. Every individual, irrespective of the position they are holding at this point in time, whether in their families, in their businesses, is living with very high level of nervousness and is looking to find answers of all their insecurities assembled around them because of this situation. Hence, I believe we require more communication and collaboration in our decision making on a go forward basis, since there are no precedent to such events. Few caveats. This event is live on Facebook, Vitrans page. Whoever is not able to log into Zoom, chat is disabled, and any questions will be through the Q&A only. I would kick off my first question to Deepak. I mean, Deepak, are you able to hear me? Hi, Deepak.
Yeah, hi. I can hear you.
Perfect, Deepak.
Hi.
What I would want to take a step back from the COVID And just before whether COVID or post-COVID, or just let's take a step back and understand, based on your experience working with the various organization, multinationals over the years, where do we stack up as a supply chain management infrastructure for the chemical sector in India at this point in time? I mean,
So, so again, thanks for being part of the whole panel and being part of the team. I think the first thing I'll want to do is broaden up the sector, not just chemical, and also make it a little peripheral. So one is the whole chemical sector, but the peripheral of it would be the pharma sector, which is becoming a real giant. And India is starting to acquire a lot of name even during the COVID time because of the CHG supplies or the pharma supplies that India was continuing to make to the world. And if CHG was supplied to 80, 85 plus, 100 plus countries. So one is the whole pharma sector. Then you have the whole agrochemical sector. One of the names, UPL, which is in the top 5. If you look at some of the other allied, chemical allied industries, paints, guys like Asian Paints, Nerolac, actually the top 5 being the giants in the paint industry. So,
right.
So the industry is big enough now. And from an infrastructure point of view, what I can only say is that there's a lot of post GST, there is a lot of warehousing space, quality warehousing space that is getting developed. So historically, we had a lot of traditional CFAs managing the whole business, but with the whole consolidation piece, and especially with the center of gravity is coming in terms of the top 7, 8, 10 cities, that people really now believe that they need to be present in, and they warehouses or C&F locations. With the whole consolidation piece, I think the whole industry is going through a huge investment phase. I read an article about 10 days back saying that despite COVID, the warehousing industry will probably grow at 35% plus 21. Some of you, or probably all of you, are aware that during the COVID time, a lot of unused warehousing space got absorbed because. So I think we are in for exciting times. 1, 2. I think there's a lot of structured space coming up. When I say structured space, a lot of foreign 3P players dedicated. I was just talking to somebody yesterday. He said, in the next 3 years, we have dedicated 1,000 crores for pure play warehousing investments in India. So I also see a lot of, for example, I know there are chemical parks getting built, there are pharma parks getting built. So there is a lot. What is happening is, as the industry is.
Deepak, you're cracking. Are we able to hear him? Hello?
Maybe slightly different. And our SOPs may be a little different, but the base standards of the industry remain the same. And it's easier to create or invest in infrastructure or get the infrastructure if we get together, have some kind of model parks, logistics parks. For example, in my industry, chemical, there's a lot of investment required before you, pinpoint and say, this is the warehouse that I want, especially from a safety perspective. The walls that we need have to be fireproof, or, those walls have to be able to absorb the fire. Tomorrow there is a blast, tomorrow there's a fire, it won't spread across to the neighboring, infrastructure around you or the buildings around you. So, and again, the kind of water tanks we need, sprinklers, hydrants, So it's easier when you have a large facility, multi-client, it's easy for a couple of us to absorb the cost rather than just one guy taking up the cost, or otherwise, accepting something which is not completely in line with your compliance or with your safety norms. So QEHS is a very, very important factor going forward. And I think from an infra point of view, investments are coming in to back that.
So can I understand that what you just to summarize, that we India has, irrespective of COVID, post-COVID, whatever the next section we'll be discussing, India has a lot to do when it comes to the chemical supply chain management, when it comes to infrastructure. One part is warehousing, and the other part is the transportation and the quality of the vehicles and the people. Can I understand that we have a long way to go?
Sure. So I think a lot of next gen transportation is already here. In fact, it is difficult to believe 4 or 5 years ago that you can have a tech-enabled company which will become a very large transportation company.
Sure.
We know the names, Revigos or Deliveries, who they're entirely built on tech. You can locate your consignment with barcodes. You can locate your consignment anywhere. So I would probably say that India had a lot of catch up to do on infrastructure. On transportation, I think transportation may be slightly ahead from that point of view. The question only is that, how do you get the whole costing in place so that you get an end-to-end infrastructure which gives you complete transparency, visibility. And I think all this comes at a cost. And as a lot of these pharma companies consolidate, so instead of 30 C&Fs, as we consolidate to 10, 12, 14, the ability, to spend more. And as we go along, again, times like COVID, where, we really struggled in the first 2 weeks in terms of, despite working with tech-enabled companies, we struggled with where our materials were because of the whole disruption. But I would still believe that they were at least able to tell me where my material was. The problems in COVID were more infrastructure. Every individual state was having its own rules and regulations on the ground. Otherwise, I think from an industry perspective, it was ready to serve.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Hi, Sanjay. I would have a next question for Sanjay. With your experience living out of Singapore and working in India and Asia Pacific, I would want to probably understand from you, what have been your key learnings, during the COVID crisis in the APAC region, and how does it change, the chemical sector in India and the APAC region? What's your experience?
Sure. So thank you so much, VTrans team. Thank you so much, Mehul, my colleague panels here, and most important, all the delegates who actually joined today. You could have decided to be somewhere else, right? And giving your valuable family time. Thanks a lot. This is a success for every one of us. You as a panelist, all the delegates, and as well as the VTrans team. Thank you so much. Now, coming to the question, right, Mehul, this is a lovely question. And following on from Deepak, what he said, if we go back last 2 decades, right, supply chains have evolved pretty seriously, right? And they have become more complex, they have decentralized, and there are so many derivatives of the supply chains, right? You have online, you have direct, you have distribution model. Unfortunately, it looks like that the primary objective in setting up those supply chains have been to reduce cost, leverage working capital, and at the same time, to find ways and means to be agile. How can you do everything? One goes south, one goes north, you still have to do that, right? Now, with COVID coming in, suddenly everything appears broken, because for the last 20 years, we have forgotten the values of sustainability, right? The values of being long in your supply chain and making sure that you have decent lines of operability. Now, that is all actually gone to the wind because of the variated approaches that we have. So the key learnings, unfortunately, we had to have a COVID to do that. Probably, I think so, right? It shouldn't have been that way. We were all lost into the profits that we make and the costs that we reduce directly. So the
Yeah.
key learnings, I would say, for me has been, as Dr. Rakesh also pointed out, agility, agility in supply chain, and I would say agility in your team setup. So today, everybody is working from home, right? We realize that you don't have to be in the office. You can be anywhere. You can operate from anywhere. So that agility of your geography and your physicality is extremely important, and you should be able to operate from anywhere, which brings in the layer of technology, telephone institutes, VPNs and stuff like that. Second learning is sustainability. Sustainability is the core. When you plan your supply chains, when you plan your supply lanes, and if you do not plan over a wider horizon, taking many of the factors, and you're just concentrating on profitability, cost containment, and agility, then you're not actually sustainable. You need to check all those boxes of sustainability. This is coming out now that we are really not sustainable. One COVID and boom, all the supply chains and the lanes are broken. Then
Absolutely.
resilience. We have been wanting to be lean, and lean is a function of you wanting to be decentralized and go close to customer and reduce your working capital. And that's why people were becoming lean, reducing costs everywhere, which means we were losing our resiliency, because lean is actually fragile, because when you're lean, you can just break open easily. So resilience over lean. Now supply chains have to go back to the whiteboard and say how I can build resiliency and still be agile. So agile has to be there, because that is where you win your orders. Then one more thing is, clearly we have been depending on one source or one geography, either due to cost reasons or due to many reasons, right? We did not learn much in terms of having a dual source for a product or having multi-source source in the same geography, so that if one location is not working, you can always turn on the other location. And we haven't been able to do that. So the over-dependence on one source has actually cleared. So these are some of the learnings, Mehul, that clearly
fantastic.
us to go back to the board and do something different. Now, your second question, right?
I have a question on resiliency, resilient supply chain versus agility. I'll just park it for a moment. But before that, since it's a great experience and the learning basically for all of us as an organization also. I mean, do you think that this is the moment for India? India, I mean, is able to seize this movement from China away or anything? I mean, it's a very common discussed question. I mean, so I mean, you have an experience of working very extensively in China, and I remember, our meetings in early 2000s, and I mean, if you can throw some light, to everyone here,
Sure. So you used a word very well just now, is seize, and Mehul, I'm taking that word away slightly. India can seize it. It is not so much as just taking a few products away from China, setting up manufacturing system in different states and countries, take away Apple's, for example, in some other state, take away some of the Korean companies. But that is only the seizing, the current momentum and riding on the wave. Actually, we don't want that. That's a very short-term gain. If we could just mirror what China did and get the whole ecosystem into India, then that's going to be a larger win, and that's going to be sustainable. Remember, we have been forgetting sustainability. So we have to think about sustainability now. So what China took 25 years to build, if India can do that miracle in the next 5 years, that's a major win for us, Mehul. So that's the seizing factor. And can we do that? Yes. But can we do it in a sustainable manner? Is gonna take a long time for us.
And I mean, so if I may ask you, I mean, how many years probably? So, we all, we know India, we know everything. We've grown up in India, right?
Exactly. I mean, so just see China. China took 25 years, but China are so over-inclusive, right? And they took each and every commodity. They started with pharma, they moved on to textiles. They took 1 inch at one ground at a time. Now, if India says, I'm strong in chemical, let me just adopt chemical because that contributes a lot of money to the GDP. We grow 16%. We can do it chemical logistics, chemical supply chain in a very sustainable manner in the next 3 to 5 years. We can do that.
Thank you.
At least chemical sector.
Yeah, if we then the natural question would be, I have a lot of participants also would be willing to probably get some guidance. Which industry do you think? I mean, if you look at last 2 months, everyone's talking about all the negativities, right? And you have very few opportunities. I mean, so what do you, which sector do you think that we have? I mean, which in chemical sector, is a winner, and there are sectors we probably know there are losers as well. I mean, can you highlight
Yeah.
some of the winners?
So if you look at India's chemical sector, we have a fantastic growth for the last 5 years. Today, our market is roughly about $160 billion, very roughly, all chemicals put together.
Yes.
And based on our current projections of a broader 13 to 16% growth, we could be around $300 billion by 2025. And that's a lot of money, right, Mehul? From
Yes.
168 billion to 300 billion. It requires a lot of infrastructure to churn in. It requires government. It requires all the players to join hands. Now, that's a positive scenario. Currently, everything appears negative, but you always have to concentrate on positives because there's always some silver lining. You just have to peel the layers to see the silver lining. So if you go industry to industry, specifically in chemical, right, from segment to segment, sorry, not industry, segment to segment, and specific to India, there are so many positives that you can do. For example, textile chemicals. I mean, that is growing, right? Personal care, agrochemical, hygienes, right? Surfactants, disinfectants. There are so many, like Johnson Devasi. Deepak can talk about it for next an hour of how Johnson Devasi's business must be going through the roof for some of the commodities, right? It will be dispirited. There'll be certain balances and imbalances there, but these industries are definitely doing well. But at the same time, we have competition as well. Remember, so for example, we have carbon black, we have rare earths. China also has huge carbon black and all the derivatives of the carbon black. But if India gets in now, starts to work with a 3-year plan with government coming in and all the MSME joining hand, we have a winner here, Mehul, for sure, at least
Sure.
in these industry segments. So nothing is all negative there. There are positives as well, for sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, thank you. I mean, so hygiene, disinfectants, surfactants, I mean, are the ones which probably will continue to do well, I guess. I mean, so that's a clear winner.
If you just go rubber chemicals, right? Health and safety products.
Yes.
For example, very lower polypropylene, amazing kind of a bandwidth there. Dyes and pigments. We can do so much dyes and pigments because China, after the Tianjin blast, government has been cracking down there so much in compliance that
Yes.
most of the manufacturing demand is solely shifting to India because India also has the ability to manage compliance in a certain ways, even now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sanjay. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not gloom and doom. I mean, there are sunshines, expected. I mean, my next question to Shankar. I mean, with your experience of working in the major corporations in India, I mean, is India geared up to seize this opportunity in terms of able to create the infrastructure? I mean, infrastructure for manufacturing, infrastructure for warehousing, or infrastructure for the transportation. I mean,
Namaskaram. Am I
Namaskaram.
audible?
Yes, Shankar.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think post-COVID, one thing is for sure, we need to embrace Indian culture in totality. So I'll start with Namaskaram. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think fundamentally, I mean, let's take it. I think India is in the path of growth curve. At this point of time, the existential could be a challenge. I think the first point is that exist. And particularly in the context of COVID, I don't think we are yet to, we are not come out of it as yet. And, basically, if you see the chemical industries, their presence is largely in Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Tamil Nadu. And here, the COVID is spreading still faster.
Yes.
And so we are not even coming out of the situation as yet, and we do not know what we are heading up for. So having said that, I can say that, hopefully that as and when we tide over the situation, the chemical industry will be the driving industry for the Indian economy. If you really see in the past as well, the chemical industry has been growing at the double digit than the Indian GDP. And even in terms of its share value to its customer, it has been offering double the value of the rest of the industry. So, I mean, irrespective of any industry, any segment of the business that needs to do well, be that automobile, electronics, construction, whatever is that, chemical industry has to play its role. So there is a huge opportunity for chemical industry. At this point of time, as someone pointed out at the beginning, we have a contribution of about less than 3%. And China, of course, the highest. I mean, I have been part of many conversations between India and China, so I would like to keep that aside. It's not really a fair comparison. But having said that, I think one of the things which I would say is that even before the COVID, the China faced a challenge in terms of the environmental issues. You know, there people have started looking into options. So India definitely stand to gain because of two reasons. One, it has a enormous domestic consumption. Besides, it has the export potential because of the coastal belt that we have. We definitely have an opportunity to export to other parts of the world. And so yes, there are constraints in terms of feedstock, which is a challenge for us. And yes, I mean, if at all somebody has to come into India, I think that we should make the feedstock available. Without the feedstock, there is no way that we are going to do well. So that's the biggest challenge.
I mean, one question there.
Yes.
We do have the India as a natural resources. India is extremely rich also with the natural resources.
Yes.
Yes.
We have the resources, but not to the extent in terms of, if I need to depend on naphtha, propylene, acetic acid, whatever it is, I have to depend on somewhere else, and I don't have an opportunity here. The petrochemical is one sector which for whatever good reasons, which should have come long back into India on a large scale, is still happening, and it hasn't happened as yet.
Sure.
So hopefully that it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
So getting back to the question, yes, India has got an enormous potential, and India will be a major player in the chemical industry per se as we progress. Now the question is, are we ready for it? I'm sure. I think one would ask why not.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think do we have the capability? And I think the Indians have definitely the resilience to overcome any situation. For instance, even in Gujarat, I can just think of some 2 decades back, we had a plague in Surat, and today Surat becomes whatever it is. So I can
cleaner city.
Yeah. So so yes, there is an opportunity for us to do well, and provided we recognize that there is an opportunity, and one other thing I can say is that nobody is going to come out of China overnight. There is going to be a time. Basically, people are not going to take their foot out of China as soon. So there is a time and space for us. We have to develop ourselves. Our policies need to be conducive. We need to have a framework. For instance, we don't have a Warehouse Act, right? This is something which has been spoken for a long time. So which is a need of the hour.
Yes.
And logistics sector. The other side of the logistics, the transportation. I've been interacting with a lot of multinationals. One of the things which will happen is that when the multinationals come into India, or even the people who are exporting to Indian companies which are exporting, there is a huge expectation in terms of compliances and framework, right? So which is something which we need to work around. And if you really see at this point in time, both our transportation and warehousing are very generic in nature. It's not sectoral specific. I think Mr. Deepak has pointed out in terms of what a warehouse for a chemical company should be. We don't have that kind of a setup infrastructure as of now. But yes, I think the good part of it is that the chemical industry is a cluster. It's not scattered. So your largest logistics park also can come out of this. And then it could be a good way forward for us to move in the right direction.
Fantastic. So Sanjay mentioned that we probably India can do it in next 3 to 5 years, right? Maybe if they wish to, not every industry, but they can select a sector as a strategy, the way China has had a strategy to select a sector. So and looking at till such time we really as a world, and including India, comes out of COVID, the recovery is not going to be like a V recovery. It's going to be a W recovery. If that in such cases, if 3 to 5 years, India will still going to be dependent on the import as continues to be. And so that means till such time we are able to become a self-sustaining 3 to 5 years, the warehousing requirement will also be going to go up, in terms of, you still remaining dependent on the imports rather than having your own manufacturing. So do you think that you have a compliant? So I would take your comment as we still have a generic infrastructure for the chemical sector. So anything in terms of the transportation also, do you have, even the transportation remains more or less generic, or you have that is well scaled, or because we spoke, Deepak spoke about a tech has probably enabled the agility, probably the quality aspect.
Okay. So if I have to answer your question, as the technology has come in, yes, I mean, the technology has definitely become part of our life. But have we embraced it well? I think that's something which we're still evolving around that. I mean, I don't think that we are still the place where we should be. So I mean, I think the point which you're trying to make, I do not. I mean, I'm not carrying a crystal ball to say whether it is 3 years or 5 years, right?
No, I mean it's an estimate. Everyone
Right.
based on their own set of experience.
Okay,
Yeah.
all I can say is that one of the things which Mr. Sanjay said is that we should mirror China, right? Yes, we should mirror China, but we should also learn the mistakes that they had done during the path of the 25 years, and we should not repeat those mistakes.
Yes. Yes.
And one of the things is that probably as of now, for instance, it's one of the fire accident which happened in the southern coast about 3 weeks or a month back, and doesn't give a confidence that we are really trying to respect the framework and policies. So we have to recognize that if we really need to build a chemical industry, see, chemical industry by design has an inherent risk. So which, unless we don't recognize that and we just draw a framework and policies in place, and not only the framework and the policies, we ensure that we abide to the policies and framework. There are enough supervision and review mechanism, and build capability and capacity in terms of understanding the importance of it.
Sure.
I mean, all this need to, but you have time.
It all has to tie up together in terms of the government efforts, the private sector, and also the respect to the environment also. I think that's the kind of mistake probably China ignored. I mean, I guess. Yeah, I get it. So, I mean, with that, I mean, Deepak, I would want you to come in to probably just want to understand, with your experience in India, when you work with the different service providers, do you, I mean, see anyone who has a capability from an end to end, the knowledge of the, I would say knowledge of the supply chain for the chemical sector? I mean, what's your experience in India? I mean, when you deal with so many players, I mean, so is there, I mean, not one, I mean, or are there enough players who has an end-to-end knowledge of the chemical, how to handle, store, or something?
Okay. I mean, I'll just quote a couple of examples to make this a little simpler. For example, guys like Castrol have existed for years, and I'm taking a few names here, and they've always held safety very, very high. They not only teach their transporters how to handle each of their products, but they also teach the warehousing teams. All I'm saying is there are examples like that in every different chemical, industrial, agrochemical, all these sectors. It's a look. Nobody understands. My R&D team or my teams manage my product better than anybody else. The question is, how do you translate that understanding to a 3PL company, a transporter? And to answer your point, do my service providers understand? So if I make them understand my requirement, and whenever you have a large logistics park getting set up, whether it's a chemical logistics park, if 4 of us, 5 of us get together, give our requirements to them. Today you have very, very large operators like Embassy, Indospace, multinational 3PL companies who handle the same things across China, Europe. So infrastructure can be developed. It is not that infrastructure cannot be developed. It is for us to ask for it and of course pay for it. Today the whole game, as we were discussing earlier on the call, is this is my current cost. If you can give me something within 2-3% more, okay, I can look at it. But the moment you say, fire resistant walls, for example, Deepak, the infrastructure. Yeah. So can you hear me?
Hello. I'm not able to hear.
Can you hear
Deepak.
me now?
Is everyone's able to hear him?
Hello.
Yeah, we are able to hear Deepak.
I think my connection is a little poor.
Yeah,
Okay,
Deepak
okay.
is audible. Deepak is
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the point that I was trying to make is that we have to make compliance, safety our first priority.
Sure.
The moment we do that and we translate that into our warehouse specifications or transportation specifications, I think there are a lot of PE funded transportation companies today.
Yeah.
There are a lot of PE funded warehousing companies today.
Yeah.
But names are familiar.
Yes.
So there is money on the sidelines. It is that
Sure.
the question is it needs to be channeled in the right way, and it is for the leaders to lead and get the infrastructure created, compliance put in place. We just spoke about what happened, down south in terms of a leak, and how it impacted, even the residents there. So. It is for us to go out and get the infrastructure created, lies with the government. So I think that is possible, but it comes at a cost, and we have to be willing to pay the cost.
Okay, sure. I mean, thank you. I mean, so I will go with a takeaway that it is the responsibility of the companies, the manufacturers, to create a 3PL, probably, who has a knowledge. My question is that, I mean, India has a long way to go in terms of having a one end-to-end 3PL provider, which is who understands chemical and their segments so efficiently. Thank you. I mean, with
See,
that,
to your point of end to end, I mean, that's really a tough one. I mean, we've struggled big time to have the same warehouse provider as the transporting entity delivering it to the customer, because then knowledge is easily held together in terms of how to carry the chemical, what to keep on top, how should the cube of the truck be, which chemical to load first and which to load later. But we've struggled because the costing of end to end never works out, and at times you see a significant jump when your same warehousing 3PL also wants to do transportation. So the economics has not worked yet, but I would love to see that working out over the next maybe 2 to 5 years.
Sure.
Mehul, can I just pitch in?
Please, you should. I mean,
sure. Thank you. But taking to this question, basically the strength of India is people are geographic specific,
right,
and they have the strength in their respective region, and so there's no harm in that. Probably we need to nurture the talent and make it. We need to standardize the process. It is not necessary that we need to do it through one person.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, so India, the question, it is now when with your experience, with Deepak's experience, when we are able to, probably what I understand is there are not national player integrated available. It throws an opportunity also for the operators to think in this direction who exist. And India, the chemical industry is as old as India's existence, right? It's not something which is new. And still India is not able to produce something like that. That itself, probably I will look at, it throws up an opportunity for the players to really create something here.
Sure.
I mean, I would say, yeah. Thank you. I mean, so Sanjay, I would probably ask one more question to you. Is say you're post-COVID era and you're sitting in a boardroom, what will be the decision making what will be the decision making? How will you drive the decision making? Because the business is disrupted, your supply chains are fractured. I mean, what will rule? Is it agility? Is it resilient? I mean, what will be the first boardroom decision making that will probably post-COVID era?
So suddenly you shifted to boardroom, and this is such an important decision. So typically, Mehul, boardrooms will not get into such an operational or tactical matter normally, and this is a good question in the current context. But COVID has such a huge and massive and far-reaching impact financially as well as human-wise, capital-wise, that now board will definitely think about it for the time being, right? And this is an exceptional thinking process. So boards currently, there are two phases of decision making. One is an immediate decision making, where board will say, guys, find out where are my assets. They will give direction to the leadership team saying, find out where are your assets. That is your people, your working capital, your liquidity, your money, right? And find out and give me a plan how we are going to plow everything back and make sure that people are safe, we have a sustainability, and you're taking care of health. That is the first priority for the board. And I'm sure that direction is already out in the open with the organizations. Now, if you take a slightly longer view, right, as we are post-COVID and we're thinking now about the post-COVID, whenever it is going to be, and now that mindset will be, they will say, they'll give directions to their C-suite leaders, right, and say, tell me what is your long-term and sustainable planning, finding a right balance between cost, quality, and sustainability. Remember, so it is not purely about one direction or other. You do not want to circumvent something, and you also do not want to sub-optimize something. So there'll be a balance they'll try to find. And in line with that, right, today, boards over last 2-3 years, as just now Shankar also pointed out, right, over last 2-3 years, boards have developed a new mindset, right? And they're actually increasing the understanding of the upsides in embracing risk. Remember, people are now actually thinking risk assessment as your top-down process and not a financial exercise. And what are the upsides to follow that, and how you can embed that into your corporate culture and institutionalize in the downstream. So this change is already there with the boards today, and boards are really thinking about it. Now, remember, making money will always remain the business objective, right? This is where we all live.
Yes.
This is where we get our money. This is why customers buy product from us, and we all survive, right? However, the boards are giving a real value to risk assessment, one, corporate governance, trust, and sustainable reporting. So these are some of the things that board is pretty big today, and that direction is not going to change. The second part of your question, which was more operational, right, Mehul, is will you select as an agile or resilient supply chain? Now, if you look at agility, you can never let go of your agility, because customers typically would like to buy a product from a company which is very secure, very sustainable, and there is a consistency in the performance, right? You don't have the tall buildings. You do well one day, you do bad next day. Your companies generally don't survive. So agility has to be there. Agility in your supply chain, agility in your geographical footprint, and how you're able to get things together when there is a pandemic, right? And resiliency. You will have to build resilience in your supply chain. Yes, Mehul, you're saying
So
something.
the question was, till such, I mean, 60 days back, people understood agility with the lowest cost.
Yeah.
I mean, they thought you having a less number of inventory, a less number of days, and if you can get it in 15 days or 1 month or whatever, people looked at that as a agility over the resiliency. I mean, so the people were really efficient. They saved cost, but when it needed, you have a full fractured supply chain where your existence of your business is questioned. So now, that is where it becomes a board subject matter, where in the BCP times going forward, such kind of event, what do you want to do? I mean, so do you want to be still centralized costing procurement or distributed procurement?
That will be applied.
Manufacturing and procurement for that.
The mathematics will be applied, and the supply chain models will evolve, right? Take into consideration your industry, your footprint, what is the product you manufacture, and then some of the lower distance like build to forecast, build to order. Keeping that whole operational gamut aside, Corona has disrupted the global supply chain so severe, right, that to build resilience now, companies will need to successfully manage a shift, right? And that shift is more important. And roughly, just a side talk, a lot of people use a word new normal, and it has become a cliche. And frankly speaking, for a good supply chain, there is no new normal at all, Mehul. The good supply chain is always agile, is always flexible, is always changing with customer dynamics, with country dynamics. So the word, if a supply chain person uses the word new normal, I'm thinking differently about it, because supply chain have to be thinking about everything being abnormal and how you still meet a customer satisfaction, right?
Sure.
So the post-COVID and into the downturn, the first priority will be stabilize into 2021, but the next phase will be build a BCP, right? As you said, business content planning for a pandemic related BCP. Today we have BCPs that have been for cyber attack, people attack, manufacturing, and
All sorts of business risks which you could think of.
Exactly. But we are not thinking about something which we are not able to think normally, right? Now you need a BCP for pandemics as well. And that is where the new boards will give those direction to the C-level leadership to be more resilient. Also, there'll be more sustainable supply chain, more decentralized supply chain, more dual sourcing supply chain, not depending on one country. I'll hand it over back to you, Mehul.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so that is exactly what I thought probably is the way going forward, that the boards will not only look at only the cost as a winner. I think they will look at the business continuity as a bigger winner in the long term. If at all, if that means they probably spending a little more on the manufacturing and procurement, I guess.
Yes.
But make sure that BCP as in every kind of event, the business should continue to function, I guess.
And one word will go away completely forever is lean. I don't think anybody will talk about lean hereafter, right? Lean is actually fragile, right? So it's gone now.
Yeah. So can I ask Shankar one question? I mean, the lean, does it mean that having the low number of holding low inventory will go away, or if to take from Sanjay's point, what's your opinion?
Afraid not. Basically, I mean, I think, if I have to see at the current context, the cost is going to be a high determining factor to run the business. People are going to really think twice before putting their money onto it. So, I don't think that people would sacrifice, or they'll carry more inventory than ever before. I don't see that happening. There are a couple of things could happen. Is that basically they will, I think, as you just pointed out, there is a business contingency plan. That factor will come in terms of the planning process, which will also allow them to spread the risk. But the second factor is that, maybe earlier, I mean, if I was paying at 45 days to my as a credit, that could go up to 60 days or whatever, so that I don't take the brunt of the burden. And that's some of these things could happen as we progress.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but then that's still a financial cost impact. But if you look at that, so you probably had a 60 days of credit, but you ended up holding 60 days inventory instead of 45 days of inventory. So there would be a natural tendency for the corporations to increase the base level safety level stocks.
If there is a need for that, I mean, I don't think they will say. I mean, they won't. I mean, they will not stop themselves. Right. But I mean, but perhaps I would also see that, if you really see from the automobile sector point of view, their subsidies are always located close to their sector. That some of these things could happen as we progress.
Right.
So that, basically, I don't need to invest so much on the working capital.
Sure. Thank you. I mean, I just want to extend the BCP pandemic BCP a little extent further to go back to Deepak. I mean, in the go forward basis, would in the BCP pandemic BCP type, do you think that the collaborative approach with the market participants, keeping in mind the customer's experience, will play a big role? Is Deepak around? I think he's left. So no problems. I mean, so do you want to take that, Sanjay?
Yes, I can.
So you think that see, at the end of the day, all of us are speaking about manufacturing, infrastructure, everything. At the core of everything, we just spoke that we exist because of customers, and customer experience is the one which drives everything. All your businesses, the customer keep coming back to you. It's not only because what you supplied in those drums or in those boxes, but the way you delivered and the whole experience of dealing with you is the one which is probably driving the higher values, right? Customer is willing to pay higher values. Sure. So in your BCP, I mean, go forward basis, do you think that all the market participants will probably work together to make sure that the customer experience remains intact? I mean, one such example is during such time, all the e-commerce companies in India, probably they made a joint representation to government that allowed them to operate so that, at least they are able to deliver the essentials, what is required in the lockdown time.
Sure. Sure. So, Mehul, that's a great question. And remember, right now, we don't have a lot of a leeway into that pandemic-based or case-to-case based BCP, right? But if you look at the constituents that you can build, customer satisfaction and agility will always remain at the top, no matter
Yes.
what, right? That is
Yes.
where we are.
Yes.
So in order to meet that, then you look at your supply networks, because you need to build a BCP in such a fashion that your risk is distributed across the entire network and not in one location. Your eggs are distributed. So you might end up as an organization that you have dual sources, and one source in Southeast Asia and one source maybe if you're a US company, you could do it in Brazil. You need to think to do it that way, right? You could actually take it back. You could backshore a few of your commodities. In order to do that, you can't do it at a mass scale, right? You can just open the doors for the entire working capital to fall through. So what you would do, you might just say, these are some of my ABC classification of my key accounts, ABC classification of my commodities that they buy. Can I set up focus stocking strategies or manufacturing locations where there's a dual source? So in case something goes wrong, at least I can retain my position with my top customers and my top commodities. That may be one of the layer that would come in, Mehul.
But I mean, so that is still limited to an organization. But when you run
Yes.
out of the stocks in any country, but the customer is paramount, will you say that you work with a competition or another participant that either drive customers to go there, or you work with them and to make sure that you fulfill that, so that the customer really believes? Is there
So-
that kind of a thing that's going to also be?
So there are 2-3 elements to it. One is it will not happen on the fly. So for example,
Yes,
you
yes.
never sell a competitor product as a revenue. But what you
Yes.
could do is, in order to have your product available at the right source at the right time, you could use something called competitors distributor network. What it
Sure.
means is, if I'm working for Thermo Fisher Scientific, my product is medical devices. I may have a similar manufacturer if it is made in Honhai, China, and if the distribution point is in India, then I may combine my 20 feet or a 40 feet container with Hindustan Hewlett Packard or with Dell, because there is no conflict of product between them. So that
True.
competitors distribution network availability is possible. People are doing it. Second thing, look at the airline industry. There is something
Yes.
called AOG.
Yes.
It's called airline
Yes.
on the ground,
On the
which is a
ground, yes.
crime, right? Now, eventually, as all the industries come out of it and the collaborative effort gets much, concerted approach in that, we might see certain industries which are very close to, say, customers like medical devices, products which are used in operations, right? Those industries might say that let us form a similar consortium like AOG, where I can sell something like a white good to make sure that a customer on the surgical table is not suffering if I don't have product. That might happen, and that should happen, Mehul, because ultimately it is the customer who should
Yes.
always win, not the organization.
Absolutely.
May I add a point here, Mehul?
Yes, Shankar, please.
Okay, I mean, I've been associated with the chemical industry for a while now. I can say, if something that can happen, it can happen only here, because this unit is the most cohesive
Yes.
unit.
Yes.
And I have seen the competitors sitting across the table to share and engage themselves about their concerns and challenges. So you can see that happen here if at the larger interest. If it has to happen, it can happen only here.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
Fantastic. I mean,
Great point, Shankar.
thank you. Thank you. Viral has been sitting very quiet and waiting, probably that I need to really go back to him. I mean, Viral, we heard the irrespective of COVID, the India throws up so much of opportunity for the supply chain infrastructure when it comes to transportation, warehousing, etc. Even the post-COVID, if India really has to take on the manufacturing also, I mean, it throws huge opportunity for the players, the participants. Yeah. I mean, what is that intrigued you most about the chemical sector? Knowing, you guys probably as a VTrans, I mean, they have a various interest in the FMCG, in the pharma as well. Why chemical? I mean.
Thanks, Mehul. For answering this question, I think I would like to go a little bit back in the history, of our company, where we started VTrans in 1958, flying the first truck from Kutch to Mumbai. For a good 40 years, we were doing transportation business in 2 states, that is in Gujarat and in Maharashtra. In the 1970s, the belt between Boisar, Mumbai and Mehsana, Gujarat, developed into what is called a chemical zone, And there was a boom in this area due to the ban of certain dyes and chemicals in the Western world.
Yeah.
This belt, I believe, was called the Golden Corridor in certain sections of the press as well. And we, being the leading transporters in this belt, became sort of the natural beneficiaries and somehow have mastered the art of chemical transportation, which forms larger chunk of our business. Gujarat and Maharashtra, incidentally, are also the hub of the chemical industry in India, accounting for more than 2/3 of the total manufacturing and trading in the country.
Mm.
Today, though we are a 6-decade-old organization headquartered in Mumbai, customer base is quite diversified, but still chemical forms a good chunk of our business. VTrans handles approximately 6 lakh metric ton of chemicals every year. Over the last 5 years, our chemical handling volumes has increased by 5.5% every year. And chemical as an industry contributes to 30% of the company's top line. We started with large Indian companies, and later on in the mid 2000s, we have also started to serve the chemical MNC companies that are entering into India. In fact, chemicals has been the driving force behind the establishment of our warehousing division, V-Logis, as well. There were so many existing chemical customers from our transportation division who used to ask us for storage facilities. And that is what really prompted us to start providing them the warehousing services. As safety, compliance, and storage standards in India are on the rise, we have sensed the requirement for a compliant facility. Our newly set up Chem Store outside Mumbai, which is in Bhiwandi, is a state-of-the-art large facility and also demonstrates our commitment to serve the chemical industry in a big way. And we definitely have plans to expand the footprint in India in providing chemical compliant facilities. So if I would say, over the years, we found chemicals is a primary industry which is catering to many other sectors and has tremendous growth potential. I mean, in fact, Mr. Sanjay, Dr. Sinha, all of them, shared us certain numbers. The market size of the industry is 178 billion in 18-19 and is projected to reach 304 billion by 2025. Chemicals are a significant part of India's trade, accounting for being third in the exports and fourth in the imports. Its non-cyclical nature. All these things have attracted chemicals as a business model to us and have helped us to increase our share in the sector, making us one of the largest logistics players for chemical industry. Though we continue to diversify in the other sectors as well. We believe that this segment will continue to grow in the future with all the factors in favor of it. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. The next question would be, in terms of the infrastructure, what do you think, Shankar, where do you see the automation will play a role in the warehousing sector? To what level of the automation that can go in the warehousing infrastructure?
Okay, warehousing, in fact, there is significant progress that have already started happening in terms of RFID, in terms of tracking the product, knowing where it is, So there is an enormous amount of technology application has gone into the warehousing structure. If you really see with the companies like Amazon and DHL, whatever, whosoever, they pumped in a lot of money to make it more robust. I think probably the technology application in the transportation sector is something which is needed, and which has to be done. At the end of the day, it's not. I think the people who have been talking about agility. It's when we are talking about agility, we also need to keep in mind how we are doing it. So in terms of the warehousing, we definitely know how we are doing it because it's a control site and it has been manned by our people. So there is definitely a process to monitor and review. Same thing cannot be said in terms of the transportation asset. So that's where the technology has to come and play a big role to make sure that transportation also happens in the way it has been designed and not by itself.
Yeah, I agree. That probably a question for Sanjay. It's very abstract. To talk, I really don't know whether to put it across in this forum or not. Blockchain, the way people understand. And do you think that, Sanjay, blockchain can really help make it more agile, where you have the government and the private participant opening up for data sharing and able to create a seamless track and trace to make sure that it is more agile? I mean, is there a scope where the blockchain can really play a role in the
Sure.
chemical?
Sure, Mehul. And I mean, so Shankar actually covered from a perspective of the transportation, right? If you look at warehouse, I'll just go back one step from an automation. Today, a lot of companies, and I've seen myself in Shanghai, they're using something called cobots, COBOTS,
Yes.
which is called a collaborative robot, much smaller, and a cobot can reach into small places where a robot cannot reach. A cobot complements a human being. It does not replace or take over. So it's a very complementing technology that you use. Another technology that you use in warehousing and freight forwarding is the wearable computer and barcode scanners. Today, you can wear a wearable on your wrist and you can actually take it along with you or a pad in your transportation and you can do your proof of deliveries. So technology is there in some or the other form and it is being used. However, chemical product, Mehul, being a little bulky in a different form and not as a technology savvy product, certain technologies cannot be really implemented full as a technology product can take, for example, laptops and notebooks and other stuff. Now, where does the second part of the question, the blockchain, right? Blockchain is a distributed database, right? It's called
Yes.
DLT that
Yes.
holds records for digital data or transaction in a way that it could be, it is secured, is it easy to retrieve and use, and easy to mirror. You can do commercial contracts using all the internal contracts that you have, right? So every time a product changes hands, like handover, the transaction could be actually, it is documented, encrypted, and stored as a block, and creating a permanent history, right from the raw material of that product to the last mile delivery of a customer. So the coffee that you are drinking right now in your cup, you can actually go and say where the coffee beans came from, Jamaica or Brazil, in a normal environment.
Yes.
And the company are doing that today. Nestle is doing that today anyway. Now, what are the case studies? Because when you say whether it is being used or not, right? It is
Yes.
good to see some of the case studies. Look at Maersk and DBS. They have formed a $200 million consortium, and actually Maersk is using that right now, the blockchain contracts for their freight management contract. So Maersk, when they do certain freight management contract with the ecosystem that they have of the vendors, they are not sending Word files and PDF file. They're actually sending blockchain enabled encrypted files. And this is so easy because you have the contracts there. Another example that we can see is called Evonik Digital, right? Evonik is a chemical company. Evonik Industries, AG, Germany. They have a subsidiary, which is Evonik Digital GmbH. Now, what are they doing? Since last few years, Evonik Industries is using blockchain for track and trace of their raw materials. Every raw material that they buy within Asia as well as Europe, including the trade documents and all the compliance management. And Evonik Digital is actually helping them. Another chemical company, BHP Billion, the world's largest petrochem, oil,
Yes.
mining, they are using blockchain for track and trace and for data recovery for their procurement processes with their vendors. So they told about 100 of their vendors, be a part of my private blockchain, and every PO that I give you tomorrow will be from blockchain, and you can continue to use that. So the applications are there. However, you have to understand there are industries of Fortune 500, Fortune 100, they are far ahead. Industries which are B class, they haven't really kind of, embraced that solution. And one more important thing, your principal manufacturer or supplier has to start that process. Somebody has to start that process saying, let me do a private blockchain and you be a part of the ecosystem so we can all do that business together.
Sure. I mean, thank you. I mean, I have very limited time and just couple of more questions before we can, looks like, we can speak for hours together, but let's, yes. So, I mean, where is India in terms of blockchain, your experience? We still far away from understanding blockchain or?
Actually, to use that question will be a bit unfair to India because the whole world actually is not anywhere at this stage, right? There
Yes.
are countries, this is very spasmodic, this is very intermittent, there are vendors who are doing it. But blockchain has been in use in many other industries, right? And it has kind of proliferated to different industries. But even today, it is still a technology which is used as nascent technology and really not gone very high. But what are the chances of India doing it? India can do it because technology, we are the guys all over the globe that we enable. We
Yeah.
are Indians are the guys who go everywhere, learn the technology, implement. So if government is willing, and if they move away the mindset of blockchain means Bitcoin, then you can use blockchain as a process. That change the way it happens, especially with the government sector, we can do that.
Sure. Thank you.
It might take another 2-3 years to do that, but at least
Yeah.
3 years time, it would definitely be on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, India being the hub of the IT in the world, I mean, it can surely, we can embrace blockchain as probably adopt the fast. India is one of the fastest IT adopter in the world. I mean, as a country.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, hi Viral. I mean, the next question probably for you. We've been for the last 1 hour, we spoke about resiliency, robustness, I mean, tech, compliance, everything. I mean, so when you're building, when you say that, you know, there is a natural gene within you as an organization to really build a scale in the chemical sector, how will you build the knowledge based within your organization? Yeah.
See, Mehul, I feel that one can build technology and infrastructure. I mean, money can, definitely help you to buy. But the critical part is, how does the company react to an emergency situation? I'm specifically talking about the chemicals.
Right.
How well can the company mitigate the risk in case of any unfortunate incident?
Right.
Is the workforce really empowered to take decisions in such cases?
Right.
These are the questions that any organization should seek answers to.
True.
So while it's highly prudent to create a technology-driven compliant infrastructure to serve the clients, the role of training and development of the workforce can certainly not be overemphasized.
True.
It also helps to create stickiness amongst the customers.
Yes.
The workforce that is engaged to handle the products needs to be imparted with the right knowledge, so they can use the technology and infrastructure to improve the performance and maintain the compliance and norms. I mean, imagine a situation where you have a high-end security personnel, in a high-end warehouse facility, but it doesn't know what to do in case of a fire alarm,
Right.
Scary. Yeah.
So
how there's a lot that needs to be done to train the workforce in, handling the chemicals, especially those who are actually carrying out the activities. So be it the skilled workforce working in the warehouses and the hubs, or the truck and the drivers. Steps need to be taken with regards to their safety and health as well. Regular learning and training programs, on-the-job training, which made in local languages, are certainly useful in these regards. One also needs to understand and appreciate that in the day-to-day interaction, the client engagement is more so with the workforce, and not with the top decision makers.
Right.
Workforce or the touch points for the clients need to ensure that the client engagement is there. So as an organization, while we strive to interact with the client to being aligned with their thoughts and the direction. So while you're working, with the clients for providing them seamless data transfer, digital billing, MIS, we also have created specific customer servicing teams that are available for answering to their queries. Now, some of the other ways in which an organization can build the workforce, during recruitment, we could be looking at certain institutes and B schools from where we can hire the people, have industry experts and consultants who can be approached for chalking out specific training programs. The skilled and the unskilled laborers can be sourced from agents who are working in that particular sector. Role play, handling emergencies, mock drills. These are also the things. In fact, our company has also taken up some of these measures. We have recruited senior level people who have vast experience in the chemical industry at various positions, so that we can strengthen the workforce, the knowledge base in our organization. And for our Chem Store, the upcoming compliant facility, we are in the process of recruiting manpower with relevant skill sets, knowledge base, and industry.
Excellent. So what's the strength within your organization? How many people you have for the chem segment? Of all.
So I would say that if I were to combine our VTrans, all the three divisions that we put together, we could probably have around 800 to 1,000 people, working for the chemical sector. We already have 30% of business coming from this.
I have a question there, but then before that, I just probably would want to ask a question to Shankar. You being so closely associated with ICC, is there anything, as a program where the member companies, they can probably engage vendors which are ICC certified, or is there a certification program for the vendors in terms of their manpower or the training kind of a thing?
Yeah, most certainly, the ICC, apart from advocacy and policy making and licensing, there is a requirement demand from the members in terms of developing the process and ensuring that the process meets the requirement and compliant, fully compliant. So, one of the point which if I may add here is that, maybe I don't need to have resources at my own. If I can standardize the process and take the best practices out from someone else and adopt to myself.
Right.
So ICC does that. One other thing which we have initiated is the responsible care. I mean, we have been talking about end to end from the beginning of our conversation. Responsible care is basically certifying the organization in terms of complying to the end to end. It starts from the product stewardship to the security. It covers the entire gamut of a manufacturing setup. So these are being certified by, this is not something which has been developed by India. It's a global standards and global practices. It has been initiated through ICCA, International Council of Chemical Association. They are actively, I think someone pointed out Bhopal tragedy, and there have been many more tragedies in the past, which made the industry to look within to set this process and practices. And that's how the responsible care came out. So responsible care is something which, today, I think in India itself, we have about 65 manufacturing companies are certified as responsible care. And globally around 65 countries, close to 6,000 company plus, if I'm right, are fully compliant to the responsible care. And Nicer Globe is another activity which is basically about the safe transportation and distribution, which is also a part of the responsible care. So when we talk about Nicer Globe, I can share one interesting point here. In abroad, when it comes to a chemical company, some of us might have heard something called Chemtruck, CPAC, all those basically the bodies which will help the transporter or the driver in an emergency from remote. So this is what the Nicer Globe has initiated, and it's been doing it in India. But then we realized that we can't do a remote support as it's being done across the world. We have to have a ground support during an emergency. So Nicer Globe have developed a team across the highways of the country with who can handle the emergency.
Yeah, wow. Fantastic.
So this is something which is, probably, we have taken the lessons from there and we become better out of it.
Sure.
And, so these initiatives are flagships of ICC, basically to ensure and promote, to ensure that our interests are protected.
Yeah, sure. Will you recommend to the members of the ICC to engage ICC certified vendors?
Absolutely.
Is there a kind of a mandate or within the ICC, or will you be as a part of the board proposal, so that what happens is every participant will make sure that they will rush towards a training?
Yeah. So we will encourage people to come from our ecosystem, because that gives the comfort to because at the end of it, we are giving an assurance. So, it's not, is it mandated? Probably not. But we are moving in the direction of building up an ecosystem which will give comfort to the members.
Oh, sure. Thank you. The last question probably for Viral, which I just probably held myself. When you said that you have 1,000 people, engaged or employed within your organization in the chemical sector, and if the kind of growth which is the chemical sector is likely to witness over the next 3 years to 5 years, on top of it, your interest where you will also be grabbing a market share from the other participants, say for example, which will probably, the growth will be stupendous. How will you disseminate knowledge across these 1,000 people? What's the way in which you will make sure that in a growing business, when you keep adding 100, 200, 300 people annually, how will you make sure that all the number of people, that the knowledge dissemination happens, so that they become relevant all point in time?
Sanjay mentioned the word sustainability, So from a service organization point of view, disseminating of knowledge is also key for a sustainability for a company like us, Now, our entire business and the stakeholders are dependent on manpower, being in the service industry. So knowledge sharing among the community will only help us to bring up the standards of all the people concerned. As a group, we've got more than 3,000 plus manpower strength. And for us, there is no other choice, but to keep learning and upgrading our people for a better output and performance. Sustainability of the people within the organization is important. Through gaining and demonstrating knowledge, people can also upgrade their skills and climb up their career path within the company. And here is where the role of the leadership team comes into play, to ensure that knowledge sharing is rampant in the organization. So if I were to give you a couple of examples in our organization, we conduct regular, or I would say pre-COVID, we used to conduct regular sessions at our hubs and select branches on how to handle the chemicals, not only just for our staff, but even for the labor and for the driver community as well. We have a training center, which is aptly called Pathshala in Ahmedabad, where we conduct orientation programs for all mid to senior level personnel within the organization and regular training programs for various departments across various levels. We provide information and knowledge through a monthly newsletter, Vijay Path. This newsletter is circulated amongst our entire organization and has a dedicated space for knowledge sharing. In our organization, we've also created an internal audit department who are trained to conduct premise audit in terms of safety and compliances. And as part of the audit, when this team also conducts training at the concerned warehouse hubs during their visit. We have naturally prepared SOPs and training manuals for the various departments, which are reviewed and revised from time to time. And these materials are made available to all our employees. For our warehousing division, we have created a series of PPTs on various aspects, especially regarding chemical handling, like safety measures, handling firefighting systems, understanding the UN classification and MSDS, action to be taken in case of an emergency, etc. However, in this nationwide lockdown scenario, classroom training sort of becomes redundant. We have switched over to digital in a big way and have ensured that each of our members is touched upon with training. Similarly, organizations can also look at for online training programs, creating and sharing visual videos in the local languages, continuous videos being running in the warehouses and in the transshipment hubs, creating central training teams whose job is to have year-round trainings for people across levels. And we've also found sharing best practices to be very good resource across our divisions. HSSE, health, safety, security, and environment is a subject that is spoken at large amongst the chemical fraternity. So the chemical companies with whom we work, are themselves a good source of knowledge for us because they themselves come with their set of compliances and standards. And adapting and implementing those can be a learning process which can be shared across our organization. Our initiatives like this webinar itself, where and the one that we did previously is also to ensure that we partner with our customers and share the wisdom and knowledge amongst them and our people so that all of us are inching towards a better informed world out there.
Thank you. I mean, on the way it looks to me, the online training is going to be, that's where when you have a distributed warehouses across India and you have various levels of people operating and also the transporters which are across the streets, it's better to have the training taken to them rather than bringing them, which was the traditional model. If you're really taking a strides in taking the training to the people where they are working, the effectiveness is going to be very high.
And that's where these online platforms are really helpful. We were quite surprised when we wanted to host certain warehouse sanitization and vehicle sanitization programs for our lowest level of people. Everybody was able to log on to Zoom and have the training conducted.
Sure. That helps. I think we run over time and we had actually 15 minutes of Q&A. I would take the Q&A right now and then we'll conclude okay. One of the questions interesting is, I'll take that. Viral, a question probably for you. How will you handle scarcity of drivers in logistic and transportation sector in the current situation to sustain in future? HCL has asked this question.
Yeah, that's in fact, a question which I think the entire transportation fraternity is probably asking themselves,
Yes.
because it's not an easy situation. We need to understand and appreciate that he's also, I mean, the transporter is also basically, after all, human, I mean, and they can easily succumb to the environment and to the factors that are surrounding them. So while we are trying a lot, to try to retain the transporters, trying to get them back, it is not an easy situation, in this particular scenario. But our team is basically working towards that, and we're also looking. We've in fact also looked at certain Medicare plans for the drivers, because after all, the driver also wants to come back. They also want to make a livelihood. But the thing that is there is that this scary environment, that has been built, so they want to get some sort of a precaution, some sort of a, platform where they can protect themselves out of it.
Sure. I mean, the similar situation for the laborers working in the warehouses as well, I guess. Yeah. So, Sanjay, next, no, I mean, Shankar, there's one question which talks about how the MSME role in the economy related to the chemical sector in the future. I mean, as a part of the members, I mean, you will have MSMEs and the large corporations. What is their role in the economy going forward for the MSME?
Phenomenal. I think, basically, I mean, they are part of the ecosystem. Obviously, they need to do well,
Right.
And if at all, I know at this point of time it could be a very challenging situation for them, and it is very difficult for them. But if they tide over it, and when they will certainly get to see the huge benefit that would come out of the future.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Sanjay, one question which is probably from the global perspective. I mean, where do Indian logistics stands compared to world logistics in chemical supply chain and warehousing? I mean, so
Yeah.
what's you? Yeah.
So, Mehul, I would say there are opportunities, and there are lots of opportunities, and almost right into the end-to-end sector, right? In terms of storage, in terms of local transportation, and not just for chemical, as in dangerous goods chemical, but even cold chain. I mean, we do not have such fabulous cold chain facilities, for example, for the pharma industry and for the biotech industry. So opportunities are galore there, not at all, not an issue there. We also have the passion. We also have the money. India is a pretty rich country. We have got fabulous reserve position. It is just a question of the demand supply not being kind of adhered to. And unfortunately, like now you are into a different industry, right? Mehul, you yourself. The warehousing and logistic industry historically in India has been called an unorganized sector, right? And if people normally do not find a lot to do, then they slowly move to logistics, right? That was the understanding,
That was the
and that's the way that was the history work, right? The demand supply regulations or the rules started to apply now. So as our cities also grow further, right? As our small cities grow and the demand grows, there'll be a shift of technology, there is a shift of people and the mindsets, and eventually there are so many opportunities in terms of storage, in terms of taking corporate standards. Just take any company in the global, and you look at their warehouse in US or in Europe, and you see the same company's warehouse in India, and you can 10 differences right standing at the door itself. Just enter the door and you can find 5-10 differences. This is not by accident, or this is not because we don't have the passion. It is just the way that we operate from a cost, quality, as a whole standard that we have. And our customers also are not demanding. I mean, our customers don't select that company's safety policy is great. I would like to work with that. When customers start doing that, obviously there'll be a huge demand supply and kind of a requirement issue there, Mehul.
Sure. Thank you. I mean,
Mehul, can I just add 2 statistical points for this question?
yes, please.
Indian logistics sector cost about 13.5% vis-a-vis globally, it's around 66.5%.
Right.
And the second thing, if I may add, is that 20% of the incidents that occur in a chemical company happens on road.
Yes.
That can answer your question.
Yeah, surely that answers the question. Absolutely. There's a question for me from Abhijit Shimpi. He is asking me, during the COVID situation, it is also understood that manpower deployed seems to be excess when the manpower is achieving about 80% of the throughput with 33% of the manpower. So we see a lot of unemployment with time and motion studies and even use of new technology. I mean, it's a fantastic question, but I would say that if you are in such a situation, I mean, if you look at the whole discussion talks about we do not have the talent. Okay, that's one. As a country in the chemical sector, I would use this not as an unemployment. I would say that such a situation, please use this, that you have a trained manpower who probably will be able to churn out more volume, and that gives you a scope for probably growth. I mean, deploy more, take more business and employ these people. If you think that the automation is reducing your existing manpower requirement, instead of removing those people, I feel if you find them to be trained, make sure that you if business allows, probably employ them, and you will be able to use them for your growth. Look at the situation what just Viral mentioned. Viral is speaking about employing more number of people. He's talking about investing in the infrastructure, and he's looking at recruiting people and then get them trained. So I would say, Abhijit, the question answer would be, make sure that you have your people with you and you use them for the kind of growth that is expected in the chemical industry. So that's I wouldn't take any more questions, and I would end this session. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Shankar. Thank you, Viral. Over to you, Ronak.
Good evening, everyone. Our esteemed speaker, Dr. Rakesh, panel leaders, and all the participants who joined us on Zoom and Facebook Live. It's my proud privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, Ronak Shah, on behalf of the entire team at VTrans India Limited, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all of you who have taken time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We are grateful to Dr. Sinha, a stalwart in the industry and whom everyone looks up to. Thank you, Dr. Sinha, for your insights on importance of agility in logistics with us today. A big thank you to you, Mr. Mehul, for moderating the session so well and ensuring that we have an engaging session today. I would also like to thank thought leaders, Mr. Sanjay, Mr. Shankar, Mr. Deepak, Mr. Viral, for sharing all their inputs and bringing so many relevant points to light. So thank you once again, everyone. Hope that today's session has been helpful to all of you in understanding and dealing with the current situation better. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye. That's it from us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.